Thanks.
Councillor Hensby too.
That's a popular meeting over there.
Mayor Savage, I can confirm we are streaming to YouTube. The meeting can be called to order.
Okay, thank you very much, folks. It is February 28th, and we are here for our Monday morning executive committee meeting. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people, and we are all treaty people in Nova Scotia and recognize the treaties that were signed by the Mi'kmaq with the Crown, and acknowledge them and live those. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to confirm that we have everybody that we need, so I ask you to turn your camera on and show your charming face as I call upon you. Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, staff. Great to be here.
Morning. Councillor David Hensby.
He's on the bridge.
Maybe in the in-camera still, I'm not sure. We'll come back to him. Councillor Mason, I see you there. Good morning.
Happy to be here. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Morning. Councillor Blackburn.
Hi, good morning. Happy Monday, one and all.
Morning. Councillor Russell.
Good morning, coming to you from City Hall representing Lower Sackville.
Good morning. Councillor Morse.
Good morning, everyone from District 10.
Awesome. Councillor Hensby perhaps is on the other side and will be joining us. Jacques Dubé, you with us this morning? I see your screen. There's your face. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee.
John Traves and Ian McLean. John?
Mayor, members of the committee.
Okay, I'm not hearing you very well there, John, but maybe it's the fog behind you. Ian? Ian, how are you?
Good morning, Mayor Savage. Thanks.
You've been retrieving people from the in-camera session. Thank you for that. Going over to the dark side to bring them to the light. All right, let's look at the approval of the minutes of January the 24th. Does somebody want to consider that?
I'll move that. Councillor Russell.
Second.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Councillor Russell, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any question on those? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Business arising. Approval of the order of business. Clerk, is there any additions or deletions?
Good morning, Mayor Savage. There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office for the meeting today.
Anybody else? Does somebody want to move the agenda as presented?
I so move, Lisa.
Moved by
Seconded.
Councillor Blackburn, seconded by Councillor Russell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Calls at this point for declaration of conflict of interest. We have no motions of reconsideration or rescission. We have no deferred business or tabled matters. Correspondence. Clerk, any correspondence?
No correspondence has been received for this meeting today.
Petitions, colleagues? No petitions, no presentations, information items brought forward, none. We will go to reports. The first one is 12.1.1. This is accessibility impact section of staff reports. I think I saw that there was a presentation. I see Tracy Jones Grant has popped up. Tracy, are you going to make a presentation for us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I will just ask the clerk's office to please put up the presentation. Am I good to go, Jill or Ian?
Just 1 second, Tracy. We are just putting up the presentation. Just give us 1 moment.
Thank you. Geez, this is making me more nervous. Ah, lovely.
All right.
So I'm presenting to you today on a motion that had come forward around accessibility impact sections for council reports. And it's not in slide, it's not in presentation view.
Now you've scared it away completely, Tracy.
I don't mind speaking. I don't want to hold up your time, so I don't mind if the presentation isn't working. I don't
Well,
mind speaking to this.
We'll just ask the clerk's office if there's an issue, if we should go ahead with the presentation, or should we wait to get it on the screen, Ian or Jill?
Mayor Savage, if you just give us a few seconds, we'll have it up there momentarily.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you.
Will do.
Well, on an aside, this is the last day of African Heritage Month. This year, as our theme was Through Our Eyes, we are celebrating African Heritage Month all year round. This year in particular, there are many anniversaries happening in the African Nova Scotian communities. So we're going to keep the theme alive throughout the year. One of the things that I'm sure you will hear more about is we have the 190th anniversary of New Horizons Baptist Church, which was formerly Cornwallis Street Baptist Church, which is the mother church of the African Nova Scotian community. So that is an interesting thing that's been happening. And many more yet to come in the community. Thank you very much. I'll take the next slide, please. So good morning. On January the 25th, 2021, the Executive Standing Committee moved a motion by Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Blackburn, that the Executive Standing Committee request a staff report, regarding the inclusion of an accessibility impact section of staff reports. Next slide, please. After doing some research and looking into this, the staff, my team, have come forward with the following recommendation to the Executive Standing Committee. And that is, it is recommended that the Executive Standing Committee recommends to Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, African Nova Scotian Affairs, to develop diversity and inclusion guidelines for all staff reports, rather than create specific accessibility impact section. The goal of these guidelines is to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility are considered at all stages of report writing process. Next slide, please. So we came up, next slide, please. So we came up with this conclusion after doing some jurisdictional scans of other cities. What we did learn was not a lot of cities actually have an accessibility or a DEI impact section to their reports that they present to council. But we did find in Ottawa, they do have an Indigenous gender equity implications section in committee and council reports. In Edmonton, their Department of Urban Planning and Economy applies a GBA plus lens to council reports on zoning and land use regulations. And in Calgary, social well-being and equity, truth and reconciliation, and culture and prevention are applied to some of their reports. So those were the ones, and you can see there's an attachment to the council report that you have that detail those with more information. Next slide, please. Why we are coming back to you to recommend a more inclusive section to council reports is that we believe that an accessibility impact section alone may be limiting, and it may not acknowledge and address the multiple intersecting aspects of social exclusion in all diverse communities. So what we were asked for was just to look at accessibility alone, but we know that we have to look at multi intersections when we're looking at providing information that represents community. Moving beyond an accessibility impact section to developing a more holistic diversity and inclusion guidelines will help address more aspects of social exclusion and remove barriers. We also believe that based on this, it's proposed to add diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility consideration lens to all staff reports. To do this, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, African Nova Scotian Affairs, will develop guidelines that will assist municipal staff in doing this as they do their report writing. Next slide, please. What would the diversity and inclusion guidelines look like? Well, these guidelines would help report authors and collaborators to inform the direction of municipal services, programs, and projects with a deeper focus and multidimensional view of diverse communities. These guidelines will ensure that inclusion and participation of all residents can be achieved, and that the insights from groups who face systemic barriers and inequities are sought and reflected in reports, recommendations, and outcomes. These guidelines would recognize and address systemic barriers and inequities people face by asking report authors and collaborators a series of questions to consider when they're developing their reports. These guidelines would seek to incorporate diverse perspectives into the municipality's work. So overall, that's a brief outline of why we've come back with a slightly different recommendation to the Executive Standing Committee, hoping to be more inclusive and not just focus solely on accessibility. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Tracy. I really appreciate that. Perhaps I'll go to Councillor Mason. You can put the motion on the floor and take it away. Is that fair?
Sure thing. I'm on my small screen today, so trying to juggle them all. It is recommended that I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion African Nova Scotian Affairs Integration Office, ANCIO, to develop diversity and inclusion guidelines for all staff reports rather than create a specific accessibility impact section. The goal of these guidelines is to ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are considered at all stages of the report writing process. I so move.
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mason.
So I see where you're going, Trace. I do. But the issue for me is, well, I mean, it's a couple of different things. It's like, I like the broader lens, I do, but I still feel like the public looking at a report may not see what's been done if there's not a clear section that maybe could have all these things. I'm interested to hear what the rest of the committee thinks, because I'm not, no, on the one hand, I get what you're saying, and if done well and consistently by all staff, it will make for better reports that better achieve our goals. But on the other hand, it may not be as transparent and clear to the public and to, especially to people in marginalized groups and folks that we're trying to demonstrate that we're doing what we say, that we're walking the walk, that we're doing what we said we would do. And then my other thought, which I'll throw out to the committee as well, is, we have talked, it's been 7 years since 8 years since we talked about adopting triple bottom line, right? So there'd be the social would be one of the bottom lines. And at the time, the methodology and framework for doing that wasn't generally accepted, but now a lot of cities do it. Calgary does it, other cities do it. I think Toronto does it. So, that it may be another way to address this, to give you an idea. We have financial implications, but we don't have social implications. We don't have all those other pieces. So anyway, over to you, Tracy. How are we going to demonstrate to the public, like, how will this change how reports are written, I guess, so that it will demonstrate to the public that we are actually walking the walk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Thank you, Councillor Mason. There's a few ways that we are going to be demonstrating that we're actually doing what we're saying. So first and foremost, we have an accessibility framework that council approved. So we are annually reporting on specifically accessibility initiatives, what we are doing across the municipality related to accessibility. So that is a big piece of work. And again, we're working to align with the province's Accessibility 2030. So there's that reporting that says consistently to the public what we're doing specific to accessibility. What we believe these guidelines would do it wouldn't drop accessibility. It would just allow for other pieces to also be included. So accessibility would definitely be, so we've already started developing the guidelines. So accessibility would be highlighted. People would have to answer, how does this particular report meet some accessibility guidelines? Or how is this report moving us towards 2030? So accessibility wouldn't be dropped. But what we're trying to say here is that it shouldn't be the sole piece upon which we look at reports, because it's intersectional. So we wouldn't just be looking at a report. I'll give you an example. When we talk about a diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessible lens, we wouldn't just be talking about how this impacts the African Nova Scotian community, because persons of African descent also represent accessibility and other determinants, gender, etc. We feel that this is more inclusive, but it will still be explicit. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it'll be the proofs in the pudding, right? Like if the reports come back and the writing changes to clearly address those issues that are intersectional, then hopefully the public will see that. But I still feel like if that work is being done, there's an argument that a summary, because that work has been done elsewhere in the paper or in the report, sorry, I'm dropping to academic mode, would be useful, especially to the public. But I'll turn it over to the committee and see what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much, Tracy, for this. So I guess just to clarify, so does this mean that diversity and inclusion, will that be a sort of a line item on the reports, much like the environment and the financial implications? And will that also allow us to look at the reports with a GBA plus lens? And I know that's something that is very important to the Women's Advisory Committee. And I know that there have been discussions about having that lens applied to our report work. This suggestion that you have, Tracy, seems to indicate that it's going to be included under one umbrella, and that the questions that are asked during the process, the guideline questions, will sort of suss out which area of diversity and inclusion is most impacted by the report. Just looking for clarification more than anything. Thank you.
So one of the discussions that we had was, do we need another section to add? So we have community engagement, we have risk, we have environment. There was some thoughts, yes, we do. And then there were some thoughts, no, we don't. with the problem with the yes, we do is, does it just become a check mark? Yep, check. We've thought about it. So the guidelines that we're writing are twofold. One is, even in writing your discussion, there are questions that we're asking writers to consider. Have you looked at your discussion piece of your report through a D&I lens? Have you engaged with the right things? Have you put on that GBA plus lens when you're writing your discussion? So the tool that we're developing not only asks people to have the D&I section, but also to think about how are we embedding it throughout the report, be it the discussion, the recommendation, the risks. So the document is still a little bit in the work. We're almost there because we're hoping to come back fairly quickly to council should you approve this with the guidelines, so that you can see how we're embedding it throughout the report, but also to acknowledge, just like we do community engagement, we would have an acknowledgement piece. One of our biggest fears is that it become a check mark.
Yeah.
You know, we just check, and we want it thoughtfully embedded and included in how we are writing reports. So it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, and it's going to be a little bit of doing some things differently. It's the same when we looked at social policy. We had to kind of change how we looked at things a little bit. This is the same for when we're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's going to force us to do a little bit more at the front end, but the end result is reports and decisions that are more reflective and inclusive of the communities that we serve. I hope.
No, appreciate that. Yeah, that does. Thank you. And very much appreciate that. And I think that this is sort of a good first start to that triple bottom line that Councillor Mason mentioned, because that is the ultimate goal for sure. But I think this is sort of one of the next steps to help us get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. Tracy, I really like the approach that you're taking with this about continuously building in the review and the consideration of this. There are two different ways of ensuring that in the software development world or in the product development world of ensuring that quality is built into a product. One of them is you build the product and then you go and analyze it afterwards and say, what did we mess up? Where did we miss? What can we do better? The other one is to say, we're building a product, I'm building a component, I'm going to make sure that this is a good component. The next component gets built, I'm going to make sure that this is a good component. And that's the approach that you've taken here. And I think that's phenomenal. So thank you very much for putting that together. Will the guidelines be coming back to this committee or to council for approval when they have been developed? That's question one. Question two relates to the motion itself, and this is just there seems to be a little bit of a difference in the motion in that at the end of it you say you're going to be making sure that it covers diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, but in the middle of the motion you're going to be developing diversity and inclusion guidelines, and it doesn't mention equity and accessibility. And I'm just wondering how you would resolve that difference.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, to address the motion piece, we might need to tidy that motion up just a bit, because the purpose is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
Yep.
All of those pieces. That's the purpose of this. Would the guidelines be coming back to council for approval? Yes. So we're currently been working with different collaborators on the guidelines. We've been working with government relations, social policy, and others on the guidelines. And we are hoping for a fairly quick turnaround on those guidelines. I believe we've currently already set the date that we'll be bringing it back, but my apologies, it's escaping me right at the moment. But it will be before fiscal year end, just because that's a timeline that we're working on.
Wow.
And as far as fixing the motion, I believe maybe Councillor Mason, you might have to amend that. I'm not too sure how it works.
Right. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if that was, yeah, we will, we'll look at that about amending the motion. Do we need to make it a friendly amendment, or does it have to be something else?
Let's,
Yeah.
so Councillor Mason's suggestion, the clerk might help us with that. Let's go on with unless there's something else, we can come back to that and come up with the wording that people need.
Okay,
And I'll go to Deputy Mayor while we work on that.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tracy, for this report and presentation. I really appreciate the perspective and the direction that we're going in. You know, oftentimes we see a report that fits the mold of the motion completely. And in hindsight, you know, we really should have gone in a different direction. So in this case, you know, you've taken the initiative and you've said, hold it. Actually, we need to build this further. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all in the same same understanding of the triple bottom line, which is social, financial, and environmental lens. So, you know, the fact that we are taking a much more broader intersectional approach to understanding, you know, the context and potentially impact to the community, to the wider community, but also to very specific marginalized communities is awesome. So great work, everyone. My question is around the outcome. So how are we going to measure the impact so that we can determine, you know, this business unit might need a little bit more support. Maybe they're going to need some more training. Potentially counselors are going to need a little bit more help as we, you know, as we begin to see this within the reports and we're asking questions. You know, there may be an opportunity here to really identify the broader gap, right, of that training. So I'm just wondering how are we going to measure the outcome and ensure that we're hitting the mark here. Thanks, Tracy.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, Councillor Lovelace. What a hard question. How do we measure the impact? Well, maybe I'll start with the training. Yes, that's what our team is here for, is to support business units and counselors with being able to identify what some of those needs are and the communities we need to be talking to and working with. And how do we measure the outcomes? So in some respects, if I may, we may not see immediate change, but I do believe we will see change over time. So for example, and I'm just making this up if you don't mind, if we were looking at doing a report on building a playground, and that playground is near a historical African Nova Scotian community and all of that, things that we would want the report writers to consider is, do we need to think about a cultural lens to the development of that playground? Do we need to be looking at the accessibility impacts of what that playground would look like? Do we need to be thinking about, through a gendered lens, for example, how those who self-identify as women and those who self-identify as men may use that playground? So I believe that by putting this lens on the reports that we're writing and the research that we're doing and the work that we are bringing back to council, we will have a more fulsome reflection of the community. So our measurement would, in some respects, be on what comes out of the work. Have we built more inclusive and reflective playgrounds? Are we looking at that in our roadways and in our signage? So I think that will be our measurement. But I also think again, pardon me, but I will say, I also think it's important that council continues to ask those hard questions and to hold us accountable for that as we are working in and doing the work with community. So, staff sees, some things, but council sees other things. So that measurement, that accountability goes, I think, and I believe, both ways. And over time, we will see what's happening. Again, we've seen what's happened with the growth of the D&I office and the way we've changed some of how we've done work and how we've looked at work. So I think the same will happen as we write reports differently.
Thanks, Tracy. I think you just did a plug as to why we need more diversity on council. So
You're
thank you
doing well.
so thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I assume that this will also, once these guidelines are in play, it'll also be part of your reporting from your department back to council. So we're in the loop as far as how it's been implemented and the outcome of it. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morse.
Thank you. And thank you, Tracy. I think this overall direction is a good one to go in. I really support what you're recommending here. Just a clarification, if you don't mind. So the work will be embedded early on in the process. It will, the lens will be woven throughout reports going forward. Will there be some kind of summary as well? I'm just concerned that I think we need a section that makes it very explicit, a summary section or something. So are the reports going to have that sort of thing along with having the lens woven throughout the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Thank you, Councillor Morse. Again, I'm getting a lot from this conversation today. So yes, I do believe that like we have, the community engagement section and the risk section, I do think there could be a summary in an accessibility section as part of reports that come forward.
Thank you. I think that could be very beneficial because it shows that the work was done as clearly as possible. It not only embeds the work, it demonstrates it in an easy to read way. So I would like to see something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. This is simply going back to, and I do appreciate the discussion that I've heard from everybody today. Thank you. This goes back to the minor change to the motion itself. And that is changing in the middle of the motion where it says to develop diversity and inclusion guidelines. I'm simply requesting a friendly amendment to change that to develop diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility guidelines.
Works for me. Friendly.
All good.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think anybody's going to oppose that.
Okay, super. Thank you very much. With that, I'm again absolutely thrilled about the direction that this has taken, and that it is being built into the report process as opposed to being a review afterwards to say, did it meet the criteria?
Thank you, Councillor. So that is now amended to include equity and accessibility before guidelines. Anybody else?
Question.
Ready for the question?
I think it's just a yay or nay, isn't it?
Is that how we're doing it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move to the district boundary review phase 1. Ian is here, and Liam, I think, if necessary. Does somebody want to take that one away?
I can put that on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Deputized Mayor.
I move that the Executive Standing Committee approve in principle the 2022 District Boundary Review Public Engagement Process and timeline for phase 1 as described in the discussion section and attachment 3 of this report.
I'll second that.
Second by Councillor Russell. Anything on that, Deputy Mayor?
So thank you for this report. I think there's just, Ian, I've already identified a couple of typos or just amendments that need to be made on page 3 under Community Council section, just want to ensure that polling district 1 is included in Northwest Community Council. And also poor town of Bedford. I can't let this get away because I know Councillor Outhit wouldn't appreciate that we left out at the amalgamation of HRM, the little town of Bedford that could. So I just wanted to make sure that we're aware of that, those updates. I think overall, I'm happy with this. It is very confusing for the public, though. Kind of that broader piece of where do we fit in and how did this take place. So I just wanted to point out that I really do appreciate that this report includes some of those kind of, historic elements and looking specifically at the UARB discussion from 2011 and the links. So I just wanted to say to staff, like, that this is really important for folks to understand, number one, why is this happening? And how did we get here to this position? Some of the communications that I've received from folks, either kind of scratching their head, wondering, does this mean we're going to have a smaller council or a larger council? And is it up to this panel to make that decision? So in the communications, I just wanted to underline how important it is for folks to understand the role of this panel. And they are not making the decision as far as the size of council. They will be talking about the really important details as far as the boundary of communities and the splitting up of some of those communities and which communities should be inside of a district or outside of a particular district. So, I think that overall, this report is great. And I do look forward to getting to the point where we can really have strong public relations push to ensure that we're getting a little bit of media attention on this, Ian. I have seen some of the ads already for the promotion of the phase 2 for the panel and recruiting for those folks. So that's good. But I think that when we look at ways that we can ensure that the information is getting to the counselor is actually distributing that information out to the public. And I think this is, again, another great opportunity to use our communications advisor in the council support office, Heidi Kirby, who can help us really facilitate some of those at times contentious communications with some districts where, communities really shouldn't be in that district. They should be in the bordering district. And so shifting that line over, I think, is going to be really important. So I'm done here. I just wanted to say thank you to staff for bringing that forward and look forward to the conversation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hensley? And Ian, were you looking to speak to that? Sorry.
I just wanted to acknowledge the first comment from the deputy mayor, and yes, there was 2 typographical errors that were put in there, including removing the town of Bedford from the original amalgamation in the report. We will be providing those edits and recirculating that report to ensure that it is consistent throughout, and I wanted to acknowledge that and make a comment on that comment.
Thank you. David?
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor and committee. First of all, I'm glad that Deputy Mayor picked out the District 1 was missing and the town of Bedford was left off the map. So I'm glad that she caught those. My question is the timing of opportunity to consult the public. When I look at the timeline, it seems like we're only consulting to the public until early April. And here I go again about our rural newspapers and stuff. If we want to put something in our March newsletter is already done and to be in the mailbox next week. So March is out of the question for a newsletter article. So it has to go April now. Problem is the timeline. There's not enough time if you're going to cut it off the first week of April for an online survey. So I'm hoping that we can extend that timeline to the middle of April. Why are we having 3 weeks to review what we heard when it should only take 2 weeks to do that kind of process? I think it's more valuable for us to have the opportunity for the public to say what they would like to say. And as I said before in the other discussions about this, in regards to, let's take our community boundaries and overlay our district boundaries. And there's some, like as Deputy Mayor said, there are portions of some communities that are being separated because of the district line and not because of the community line. I think that we should try to engulf a full community within a particular district area. As a case in point, I keep pointing out is the Little Sand River subdivision I have in the Westfall Municipal Planning Strategy. It's part of Cole Harbour Westfall Municipal Planning Strategy, part of the Westfall community, but it's in my district. And it'd be a better fit to be in the Cole Harbour Westfall district instead. Commonality and land use plans and a lot of other stuff. But anyway, I'm looking forward to this, but I'm hoping that there's going to be no sense of demalgamation in this particular review, because I saw some of the discussions there with Mr. Mills' points again in that report, talking about the urban-rural split. We're not talking about reshaping a municipality here in regards to should we have 2 municipalities or 3, whatever the case may be. We're staying as we are in regards to the geographical boundaries. It's what the internal boundaries may be is the only issue. So that's how I see this particular thing moving forward. All right.
I think that's very true. Thank you, Councillor. Ian or Liam, anything on that?
Councillor Hensby, through the mayor to yourself. We are working and have heard the comments on some of the rural newspapers and the rural pieces for some of the promotion of this. We have been in contact and are looking to promote surveys and events through those newspapers that are out through the community as well. So we are doing that component of it to try to attempt to meet that requirement. We will also provide things to councillors and look at our timing to be able to promote some of these actions through newsletters as well. So I appreciate those comments and committing to being able to provide that information to people as quickly as we possibly can, especially when we tie into those survey questions and trying to get that survey finalized. We'll make sure that we promote this through the councillors and also tying in with the comments about the communication advisor from earlier as well.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. My comments are on attachment 2, and attachment 2 shows the 16 districts and how the populations and the voting numbers work, and those make sense. And then we get into the percentages and the decimal values, and I wasn't able to resolve those. So I took the data that you've provided here, dropped it into my own spreadsheet, ran the numbers, and I wasn't able to see the values that you've got. So I was unclear on the formula. I understand the justification for it, but it's not clear in attachment 2 to other people reading it exactly what the intent of that is. And for it to show that at this point the population of for example, Lower Sackville is 18.82% below the average doesn't really come through. And when we're looking at 2024, that it's going to be 19.1% below based on the figures that are used here. So I'm just looking for, when it comes to further broadcasting this in a mechanism that that would be used by the public or by others, that this is looked at through a lens of making it a lot more. I'm not sure where to go with that. I think you've got my point.
Yeah.
Councillor Russell, through the mayor to yourself. So again, understand the point and understanding where they're coming from on that. We are intending on bringing a jurisdictional scan to Executive Committee in March that showcases the population and the amount of districts in other comparable municipalities, where we'll provide this information as well. We'll look at how this is presented and try to present it in a way that will be clear to the public, yourselves, but also be comparable to that jurisdictional scan. So I appreciate those comments, and we'll look at how that is presented when it comes forward at the next meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you. Colleagues, we ready for the question?
Question?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That is carried. Thank you. And Ian, thank you to you and your folks for the continued, to Liam, for the work on this. This is a fair bit of work. So thank you very much.
Just one question, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Would we know when the survey link could be available so we can get it prepared for our April newsletters, which will be due in a couple of weeks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, Liam McSween. elections and special projects manager. Absolutely. We'll be working with Heidi directly when we have the draft survey questions and the link and everything ready to go. We'll be working with comms as well. So we'll definitely give you some lead time because we will be relying on council to get the word out for this as well beyond our communications outreach.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vic.
Liam, you don't have to identify yourself. Everybody here knows who you are. You just like saying that title, I think. Yeah, you're still getting used to that.
I'll get it eventually, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for your great work, Liam. You've been a stalwart. Okay, colleagues, there are no committee reports, standing committee motions. Let's look at the in-camera, determine if we need to go in camera. First of all, on the minutes, does somebody want to propose carrying the minutes of the in-camera session?
moved.
Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Mason. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
That's
Aye.
okay, now there's a couple of other issues.
Happy to test the committee on the first one. I think they all can probably go, but
14.2.1, the personnel matter, Councillor Mason.
I'll move the executive standing committee one, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private confidential staff report dated January 11th, 2022. And two, direct the staff report dated January 11th, 2022 be maintained private and confidential. I so move.
Second it.
Seconded by Councillor Hensby. Is there anybody that wants to go in camera to discuss? If there's no questions,
Question.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? 14.2.1 is carried. 14.2.2. Does anybody want to?
I'll
Councillor,
do it. Someone else wants to, that's
Yeah,
fine too.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you,
I
Mary.
move, sorry, I move that the Executive Standing Committee, one, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated February 22nd, 2022, and two, direct that the staff report dated February 22nd, 2022 be maintained private and confidential.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Mason. Any discussion on that?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those are opposed? That's carried. Councillor Russell, do you want to move that we go in camera for 14.2.3?
Yes, please. That's so moved.
All right, seconded.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? All right, we will go in camera and we'll deal with 14.2.3. So we'll go into the in-camera room.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be placing the holding screen up while committee is in camera. Thank you. Good morning. It is now 11:02. The slide can come down and executive committee will be returning to the in-public meeting. Mayor Savage, if you can hear me, the meeting can be called back to order on your call.
All right. Colleagues, we're back in our public session. I'll go to Councillor Russell for 14.2.3.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if any changes need to be made to this motion. I don't anticipate that they do.
I think what was done in camera still would be covered by the motion, Ian. Go ahead, Councillor Russell.
Okay, thank you. I move that the Executive Standing Committee, one, adopt the recommendations as amended in the private and confidential staff report dated February 14th, 2022, and two, direct that the staff report dated February 14th, 2022 be maintained as private and confidential.
Second.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
have no added items, notices of motion. Public participation. Next meeting, March the 28th, which I may or may not be here for. I just want to say one thing, colleagues. There is a possibility at this point that we may move the next executive committee from March the 8th to the following Monday. That'll be determined today or tomorrow, but we would only do it on the consensus committee. If it didn't work for committee, then we would keep it the way it is. But that's all I can say at this point, Ian. We're still working away at that, I think. So, yeah, okay. All right. Does somebody want to move adjournment? Councillor Morris, thank you very much. We will be adjourned, colleagues.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian and crew.